What's up? Are you depressed and you're not sure why? Do you feel down? Do you just not know how to get over it? You tried self-help books? Well, you're in luck because today we're talking about why being civilized caused depression. This is the Existential Stoic Podcast. I'm Danny, everybody. Randy, what's up, Randy?
Yo, Danny.
Yeah, so this idea for an episode I thought was interesting, which is like, because I've come across this a bunch of times. So in Nietzsche's philosophy, he talks about how, basically we have this conflict because like in contemporary society, he diagnosed this with he said, our greatest danger is basically nihilism because we have all these values and beliefs that we don't really believe in anymore. So like Judeo-Christian beliefs, basically. Whether you believe in it or not, it still affects you. And those sorts of like Judeo-Christian morality tends to favor the rational and not the animal side of us. And so a lot of times we're told to just like ignore, deny, or refuse sort of the expression of these things that are natural to us. And so that can lead to all sorts of problems, mental problems like depression and stuff. And so you have this sort of conflict between the animal you and like the rational you kind of fighting. And society keeps telling you, or being civilized, right? Means not acting out on these things, not hitting the person when you're angry, not, engaging in weird sex acts and not, this and that. And so, there's a lot of us that might not be getting expressed. And so that can cause depression. Nietzsche actually called it internalization. So everything about us, all of our drives, they want to be expressed in the world. And so if we can't express them outwardly, we express them inwardly, which I always thought was a cool idea. It's like guilt, right? And like negativity, depression, all that stems from this sort of activity. And then I was also thinking too, because it's funny in Ray Bradbury's Martian Chronicles, the chapter 2001, June 2001, The Moon Be Still Is Bright, they come across the Dead Martian Society. And the one guy's an anthropologist and Spender, and he praises them. He's like, they knew how to keep the animal in the Martian and like not get rid of the animal part as well. So it's like blended. Their art and science and all that stuff is blended instead of separated. So yeah, I thought this would be interesting because I think a lot of us struggle with this. That's a lot of information at first. They're out there, right?
And there you have it. That's our episode. Thanks for
Yeah.
joining us today.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very interesting topic because I agree wholeheartedly that civilization does cause depression, a lot of the stuff we're seeing nowadays, because people aren't allowed to be humans anymore. And
no.
we have to be perfect. We have to conform to all these things that we don't agree with. I mean, punching someone who angers you. I have this neighbor who I just want to like, oof, destroy. But I can't because of civilization. And so he can passive aggressively attack me all the time because it's okay in terms of legality and civilization. But if I were to do something physically, that would be the end of it. And so it's a really difficult thing because it causes a lot of uh, otherwise repressed anger if I didn't do stuff to actually combat that.
Well, that's just it, right? It's like there's what we see is a lot of this passive aggressive crap because there's like a line, right, that you can't cross. And then if you're on the receiving end like you are, right, you can't act out in ways that would immediately resolve that situation or like
100%
be
immediately. It
alleviated,
would have
right?
resolved it a year
Yeah.
ago. 100%. Yeah.
Well, it's crazy too because I was thinking about this a lot this week since like I was discussing this with Anna and like it's interesting too because back in the day, like if you go far back, our days were very much focused on survival. Like food was a huge factor, like what you're going to eat, growing food, getting food,
Hmm.
hunting, all that stuff. And so we had like things that we were doing that had a real point for our survival. Like if you don't do this, you will die. And so there's no question about meaning or purpose in life. Like what you're doing is living, right? And everything you're doing is for living. And then like that also comes with protecting. So like, if you look back in time, I remember there was this article I was reading, I forget the guy's name, but he was talking about how like, dude, if you look back at like the medieval ages or like, Japan during like samurais and stuff, like the murder rates were super high relative to the population, right? And like, and people had to protect their own land. They had to protect their own stuff. So it wouldn't be odd for somebody just to punch somebody or to, and people tried
Or
to
to
resolve things.
challenge them to a duel. And I mean,
Yeah,
the
right.
issue is going to be resolved because one person won't be walking away.
Literally.
Yeah.
And it's crazy, but I think, the more you go forward in time, the more you get all these sort of, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. No, because civilization, civilization. And being civilized ends up meaning that we're like these perfectly rational beings, but we've like lost all that other stuff that's still hugely a part of us. Like it's not like evolution just immediately goes, oh, you don't need that anymore. Right? And I think that's why so many of us struggle with our emotions and stuff, right? Because how do you express this when like, your anger is, I want to punch this guy, but you can't.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a challenging thing because there's like a few different viewpoints of it. So you mentioned emotions, and scientifically, emotions are just these things that come up and go away in like 90 seconds if you don't act on them. Like they're just
Right?
these flashes of chemicals in your brain that come up and go away if you don't act on them. But most of us just stay stuck on them or proliferate them. And that's one
Yeah.
thing. And then there's this whole like Buddhist concept of karma. Like that if you were to punch this person, then that would just prolong the karma. And so maybe
Yeah.
this stuff is happening because of some karma that you did in a past life that's following you. And if you let it go, then you can be the one to break the cycle of karma. So there's a whole bunch of different thoughts
Did you
on this
ever
subject.
have you ever read the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying? There's a great example in there. It's like a little story. 'Cause, they do all this little, and I think it's in other texts. You might have heard it. It's like, it's the guy's like he's like a king or something, and his son's the prince, and they're having like this blood feud with like another area, and like his son wants to go like attack or whatever, and his father says no because only hatred only breeds hatred. Only non-hatred breeds non-hatred,
Hmm.
right? So the only way to stop this essentially like blood feud that they've been having for generations is actually not to perpetuate it.
Yep.
Like somebody has to be the one to stop it, right?
Hmm.
And I think there's truth there too. And this is like, that's the conundrum of civilization. It's like we all know, like acting on these things is not necessarily good. Like, knocking at your neighbor, right? Continuing these things, it's not going to help us long term, but it does satisfy that animalistic need, right? Or that urge.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of problem we have, I think, because it's like it's easy to say, yeah, non-hatred perpetuates non-hatred, of course, but what do we do then with all these feelings that are naturally a part of us? They're our animal self, right? Like, the shame we feel, or the anger, or the guilt, or all these things. How do we process these things in the right way?
Hmm.
That's the tough part.
Yeah, it's really a challenge because animals kill. Animals treat different sexes differently. Animals rape. Like all
Yeah.
this stuff that we don't do, animals do it, and we're descendants of animals. So what are we supposed to do with that stuff?
I mean, we are animals, right? We're not even descendants of, we are. Yeah, and I
Hmm.
think this is where it gets tricky because I know I've always liked Nietzsche's responses I've always liked, which is, and it depends how you interpret them, but it's like transforming those, finding ways to not, because those drives are part of who we are, right? So if you get rid of them, you're denying part of yourself. So to be authentic, the only way to be authentic is to actually experience them. And his argument is essentially we need to find ways to transform them. And so, say anger, right? Taking anger and taking that energy and expressing it into something positive, maybe art or something, right, is a good example. Or maybe taking on a new skill, right? Or figuring out a way to do something differently, right? But using that anger in a way that's directed towards something positive rather than towards that, so it still gets expressed. But realizing that it's actually you,
Hmm.
not that it's like something you can just deny or ignore, right, is important because
Hmm.
otherwise you're missing part of yourself.
Well, and also it says something like having the anger says something really good about you because it says, for example, that you have very clear boundaries and
Yeah.
that you respect yourself and want good things for
So
yourself
you
and
have
you won't
strong
let
feelings about things, right?
yeah.
That you care about stuff, that
Hmm.
there's a certain level of like standards that you want to be met. I think they are good things. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's from that's from what's that book? The guy talks about that. The
Oh, feeling
Better.
great. Feeling
Feeling
great.
great. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, I
Hmm.
like that idea that like there's always this like there's always these positive aspects of all these things connected to it. And if we find that, that can be a helpful way, I think, to see too how to maybe work around this, which
Hmm.
is interesting. Because I
Yeah.
think a lot of us are kind of stuck in this. A lot of people struggle with this. How do
Hmm.
how do you do it?
Well,
Yeah.
and it can be challenging that it does result in depression because like, when you have unresolved subconscious conflict or like stuff happening that you're not consciously aware of, particularly conflict. And oftentimes what we're talking about with civilization is a lot of this conflict stuff, stuff that
Yeah.
you have to do that you don't want to do. And there's no clear answer because it's unresolved. That can easily cause depression, and depression goes hand in hand with hopelessness. And hopelessness is the
Yeah.
worst thing ever because it makes you believe that it'll never get any better. And
Yeah, this
oftentimes
is it.
people commit suicide at that point because they think, well, if it's not going to get any better, then there's no reason to keep going. And while that makes that while that argument may make sense, it's not true because there's no way you can tell if it'll get better or not. As a matter of fact,
Yeah,
it could be the absolute worst it will ever be right now. And usually that's what it is. Like usually when you're at the absolute worst peak, that's when it feels like it'll never get better. But
yeah.
in life, things come in cycles. They come, they go, they get better, they get worse. And so it causes a lot of issue because it's like this unresolved thing going on beneath your consciousness. So maybe part of it will be bringing it to the surface. Like for instance, we've talked about this before, but like I was the most depressed I've ever been in my life when I was about to get married to someone who I didn't want to get married to. And because I was young, I didn't know what I was doing. I was given an ultimatum that either we needed to get married or break up, and I didn't feel like being single. And so getting married was the next best step. And everyone loved her. My family loved her. My friends loved her. But I really wasn't crazy about her. And I didn't want to spend the rest of my life with her. And
Yeah.
so it was like really, really difficult. I was super depressed. And then when, like, and it was subconscious. I didn't know that this was the cause for it. Everybody else knew that
Yeah.
this was the cause for it. Like I went to the hospital and I was like, I'm feeling really depressed. And they're like, is there something going on causing you stress? And I'm like, well, I need to get married to this girl that I don't really want to. And they're like, well, maybe you should look at that.
That's
And
probably
I'm
it.
like, yeah. And and so like then I was talking with my brother and he's like, no matter what you do, I'll love you either way. And that just like broke it for me. Because all of a sudden
Yeah.
it wasn't an I get married or I lose the love of everyone that I respect and I love. It was I break up the wedding and yeah, sure it'll be painful in the short term, but I can also do that and still have the love of people who
Well,
matter to me.
and better for both of you too, because that's not fair to the other person either, right? To get married and be in a situation like that where you don't really feel the same way.
Hmm.
You know? And ultimatums like that are terrible too, because I feel like that's what a lot of us face, these obligations, these ultimatums, these perceived ideas that like it's this or that, when
Hmm.
usually it's not the case. I think that's a really good example too, because you also hit on that idea of like, especially when we were young, I think relationships are a good example of that. Like you're so used to like being together with this person that also like the idea of like without them feels weird because that's like new. Like, are your friends or your family going to look at you differently, right? Are people going to judge you for it? Like,
Hmm.
because you're the one that broke it off or whatever. Instead of looking at it as a good thing, which I think it is.
Hmm.
Same thing with like divorce, I think that people struggle with, right? Like that need to stay together because they made this commitment. But like if you're not happy, you know, this is not necessarily, I mean, it doesn't mean you shouldn't work on it, but like maybe that is a good option, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's also realizing like that we have choices too. And I think you're right. Bringing it to the surface can help us see that there still is other choices available and how we express these things or how we go about sort of resolving these kind of conflicts that we're facing. And I
Hmm.
think it's a perfect one. I think we all feel that a lot too, because like when we're younger, I know like with the expectations, like we both did a lot of things that maybe we wouldn't have, but like we thought we were doing the right thing because everybody told us it was the right thing,
Yep.
society, everything. And it's like, so you really don't know what to do either. And you're constantly fighting that. It's tough. Yeah.
Hmm.
So being self-aware is a big part of it. Yeah. And I figure out
Hmm.
like, why do I feel this way? What am I maybe missing? Or what is it maybe about me that's causing this?
Yeah. But also embracing the animal part of you because that is
Yeah.
part of your humanity. Like that's like I said we said descended from that earlier and you corrected me. You said no, we still are animals and that's 100% true because we are.
Yeah.
We just forget it because we think we live in these boxes like civilized refrigerated boxes or whatever that all of a sudden we're not
Well,
animals.
it is crazy when you think about it that like we're the only animals that can like go through our whole day and never step foot in nature or see it. That's kind of crazy when you think about it. Like the natural environment. We can stay in like these, like a city. I mean, if you live in a city, you might never actually step foot in nature,
Hmm.
for a long period of time because you're in this sort of constructed world. And it really does make you feel different from nature, right? Like we spray poisons to get the bugs out. We trap the pests. I mean, everything is removed. The only thing that's allowed is like plants and stuff in pots, very like
Yeah.
specific. It's very, yeah, it's very strange. And it is easy to forget that we are animals too, and that is a huge part of us, right? That's what we are. So I
Yeah.
think we need to embrace it and bring that forward too. And not in a bad way, but just to be our whole selves.
Yeah. And I also think it's worthwhile to look at, so like, sure, civilization causes depression, but depression can actually be, we stigmatize depression, but actually it's a
Yeah.
very useful thing. Like
Yeah.
if you don't let it do something that's irreversible, and particularly I'm talking about suicide and that thing, like if you actually just be depressed and be like, hey, this is something, because it is something that eventually you get through. Like I think it requires going through depression a few times to see that like as bad as things are, they're not going to
Yeah, you
stay
can
this
get
way
through it.
forever. Yeah. And that can like I heard it called like inverse hopelessness or something like that. We're basically because like hopelessness you think is never going to get better. Inverse hopelessness, you know it's eventually going to get better. So
Yeah.
like, but like that's essentially what you have to do with depression is just
Yeah.
recognize that it sucks because it feels terrible. It feels the worst thing ever.
Oh
And
yeah,
it's
it
just like
does.
that day and day and day in and day out, just over and over again
Oh,
all
dude, I
day.
felt it too, where like you imagine the rest of your life feeling like this, and it's like, there's no way I could do this, right? Like I
Hmm.
totally felt that before. It's
Yeah.
understandable, but you do get through it. And I think what
Hmm.
you're saying too is really important, which is like, because it's also depression can be like a he really good indicator that things are wrong in your life. I mean,
Yeah.
because I know for both of us, like the main times we've been depressed is when something we need to make a big change, and
Hmm.
we're either afraid of it or dragging our feet or don't know what it is yet or whatever, haven't admitted to ourselves yet that that's the case, whatever.
Hmm.
But I think it is one of the major ways in which our body sort of tries to tell us that something is seriously wrong that you need to address.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And oftentimes we keep ourselves so busy that we don't give ourselves the time or the space to do it. And I've heard that like, some people say depressed sounds like deep rest or maybe also deep reset. And like both of those things could make
Yeah.
sense when you take a look at it because usually it is something where you need to make a big change. And it's a huge conflict because there's these different values that are coming up against potentially your animal of nature versus your civilized nature or something like that,
Yeah.
rational versus like feeling. Whereas you have them both going up against each other and they're fighting, and you don't even realize that they're fighting because you're like, this should be so easy. Why can't I do this? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's interesting too, because it's like, what you said too about distraction, I think is a big factor as well, because it's also like easier than ever in this day and age to distract ourselves. Like I don't think it was, and I think that's probably why there was less depression in the past, right? Because like people didn't have time to think about that. They didn't have
Hmm.
time to dwell on things like that because you were in a situation where like this is what I have to do, right? Like there's not like you had like a ton of choices, but now it's like, dude, there's so many things you can do to distract yourself. Video games, phones. There's so many screens and ways to just
And they're not
have
healthy
time pass.
distractions either. Because
No,
like
not all of
no.
them.
Like I remember there was when I was in like the whole deep, like reading every David Burns book, there was another book that I read on depression. I forget, maybe it was called Depression Checklist or something like that. I don't remember what it was called. But basically it was like, it was saying how like, if you want to be not depressed, there are a few things you have to do. These are non-negotiables that you have to do every day. One, exercise. Like 20-minute walk, that counts. Okay.
Yeah.
Two, meditate. Just sit down and don't do anything for 15 minutes a day. And it had some other things, like maybe eat healthy or get enough sleep. I don't remember exactly what they were, but these were like non-negotiables. And if you take a look at times, at least I take a look at times when I was depressed in my life, I was not even
Nope.
walking 20 minutes a day. I
No.
was not meditating. I was probably not getting adequate sleep, probably not eating great. And so all those things are just like, they're not going
Well,
to
no, you're
cure it immediately, but if you do them consistently, you will start to feel a little bit better.
Well, what's funny is every time I start to get out of depression is when I start doing those things.
Hmm.
Because when you're in it, it's like You don't want to do anything. You lose all interest. And then
Yeah.
you sleep like crap because you're not doing anything. Like you're not active during the day. You're just like, spinning your head around like in this terrible thoughts. But as
Hmm.
soon as you start doing things like that, yeah, you start seeing that like, oh, I can still do stuff. There's still actions I can take that make me feel better. There's still things I can do to kind of get this energy out. And that's the other side of this too, is like a lot of this, like, I think this conflict that we have with the civilized versus the animal self is also like this energy that we have to use. Like this built up energy of like, because we're not exercising, we're not, I mean, that's the other crazy part about modern society is you can sit all day and be successful. I mean,
Hmm.
literally,
Yeah.
people, it's kind of crazy that you can have like we call it the sedentary
I
life is
still I
insane.
still wonder like how we made it sitting in chairs being the default way of sitting because like if you look historically that's not the natural people like squatted back in the day
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
all of a sudden the chair and the sofa was developed and now you just sit like that and it's not great for you at all by any means but
yeah.
that's just how everybody sits.
There's this guy, this scientist that travels down to, he studies like the indigenous groups that still exist in Amazon and stuff. And that's one of the things I remember watching a video. He was saying like at night, everybody like gets around the fire and they squat, like they kind of sit on their, just on their feet, but like
Hmm.
squatting down.
Yeah.
And he's like, it was so hard, I guess he's saying for him at first because it like felt so uncomfortable and unnatural almost, even though that's
Yeah.
like the natural way to be, right?
Yeah, because you
But
need to
after a
be
while, he
somewhat
felt better.
flexible. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because like you look at how like these groups that are like still living that way live, and it's so different from the modern life.
Hmm.
Where they're always moving around, they're always active, they're always in community.
Hmm.
There's all these things that their life has that ours generally doesn't. And I think that's kind of that conflict as well. They're sort of more in tune with that natural self.
Yeah,
Yeah.
civilization has caused a lot of issues.
It has. It has. Well, it makes it hard, because it adds that extra layer of stuff that we have to kind of deal with. And I think, the only way around is knowing ourselves better, right? Knowing who we are, being honest with who we are, is a way to kind of start to address these things and get around them. Yeah. There you have it then, right? So, is being civilized causing depression? Yes. If you like this episode, you can check out a bunch. We have tons of other episodes. Check them out on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. We will be back later this week with another episode, though. Until then, this is Existential Stoic Podcast. Later, Randy.
Later, Danny.